Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihari Madhava Kunjabihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihari Radha Madhava Kunjabihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Padajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Padajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Padajana Ranjana Anandana Padajana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihari Radha Madhava Kunjabihari and Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihari Radha Madhava Kunjabihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parajikacharya Astoto the Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parajikacharya Astoto the Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 11th day of January 2021 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 6 entitled Dhyana Yoga, the Yoga of Meditation. Page 269, text number 15 at the bottom there. Ready? Okay. Yunjanevam sadatmanam yogi niyatmanasaha shanti nirvana padamam vatsangstam hrigatchati yunjanevam sadatmanam yogi niyatmanasaha Shantim nirvana padamam matsangstam adhigacchati. Alright, just since it's you and me, we'll just review the second half of that first line. Yogi niyatamanasa. Yeah, niyatamanasa. Can you say niyatamanasa real fast? Okay. Alright, let's try it again. Yunjan evang sadatmanam yogi niyatamanasah shantim nirvana padamam matsangstam adhigacchati. Yunjan evang sadatmanam yogi niyatamanasah shantim nirvana padamam matsangstam hadigachati. Word by words. Yunjan, practicing, evam, as mentioned above, sada, constantly, atmanam, body, mind, and soul, yogi, the mystic transcendentalist, niyatamanasah, with a regulated mind, shantim, peace, nirvana padamam, cessation of material existence, matsangstam, the spiritual sky, the kingdom of God, adigachati, does attain. Translation. Thus practicing constant control of the body, mind, and activities, the mystic transcendentalist, his mind regulated, attains to the kingdom of God, or the abode of Krishna, by cessation of material existence. Purport. The ultimate goal in practicing yoga is now clearly explained. Yoga practice is not meant for attaining any kind of material facility. It is to enable the cessation of all material existence. One who seeks an improvement in health or aspires after material perfection is no yogi, according to the Bhagavad Gita. Nor does cessation of material existence entail one's entering into, quote, the void, which is only a myth. There is no void anywhere within the creation of the Lord. Rather, the cessation of material existence enables one to enter into the spiritual sky, the abode of the Lord. The abode of the Lord is also clearly described in the Bhagavad Gita as that place where there is no need of sun, moon, or electricity. All the planets in the spiritual kingdom are self-illuminated like the sun in the material sky. The kingdom of God is everywhere, but the spiritual sky and the planets thereof are called Param Dhama, or superior abodes. Excuse me. A consummate yogi, who is perfect in understanding Lord Krishna, as is clearly stated herein by the Lord himself, Matchitta, Matpada, Matsthanam, can attain real peace and can ultimately reach his supreme abode, Krishna Loka, known as Goloka Vrindavan. In the Brahma Samhita 537, it is clearly stated, Goloka eva nivisat yakilatma bhutaha. The Lord, although residing always in his abode, called Goloka, is the all-pervading Brahman and the localized Paramatma as well, by dint of his superior spiritual energies. No one can reach the spiritual sky, Vaikuntha, or enter into the Lord's eternal abode, Goloka Vrindavan, without the proper understanding of Krishna and his plenary expansion, Vishnu. Therefore, a person working in Krishna consciousness is the perfect yogi, because his mind is always absorbed in Krishna's activities. Savayamana Krishna Padada Bindayoho. In the Vedas also, Shvetashvara Upanishad 3.8, we learn, Tameva Vidadvati Mrityameti. One can overcome the path of birth and death only by understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. In other words, perfection of the yoga system is the attainment of freedom from material existence and not some magical jugglery or gymnastic feats to befool the innocent people. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and to all members of Shri Parampara. So, after a short outline of the process of Ashtanga Yoga here, or Dhyana Yoga, the yoga of meditation, where to sit, how to sit, and most importantly of all, at the end of text number 16, Asita Matparaha. Those three syllables make all the difference. They mean me, making me the ultimate goal of life. And so the yoga system aims at the same goal that the Bhakti Yoga system aims at, which is Krishna himself. And here in this text 15, he talks about Matsangstam, which is my abode. So it's not some vague, amorphous Brahman. We're looking for to return back home, back to Godhead, by the process of, in this case, controlling the mind. Remember how the mind is a key element here in this Dhyana Yoga system. And we learned how the mind can be the best friend or the worst enemy. Remember that? Text 5. One must deliver himself with the help of his mind and not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. Continuing text 6. For him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends, but for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. So in the Bhakti Yoga process, it's the same thing. The mind has to be fixed on Krishna. And that doesn't come all of a sudden because we are conditioned. For many millions of births, we've had our mind absorbed in the material energy. And there's so many memories, so many impressions, so many unfulfilled desires. And so that's all within the mind, within the subconscious, but it's there, mostly in the subconscious. And those tend to come out at various times, give us tendencies for, what we want to do, what we don't want to do. But in the human form of life, we have an opportunity to train the mind. And this is the famous dictum to control the lower self by the higher self. If you remember at the end of chapter 3, there's a very important little discourse on lust. Arjuna was asking, what is it that forces us to do things that even we know are wrong? It says, it's kama. Kama esha, krodha esha, rajogunasam. Kama and krodha go together. That's lust and anger. A very powerful desire is ultimately frustrated in this material world and produces anger. And that can just take hold of one, and one will do things he would never ordinarily do, but can have repercussions for the rest of your life or many lives. So these are the forces that we're grappling with in trying to attain self-realization. And the process of Krishna consciousness transmutes that lust back into love of Godhead. In a very illuminating purport in that section at the end of the 3rd chapter, he says that lust is nothing but love of God, prema, that has been adulterated or distorted by, or probably use the word perverted, reflection, by the modes of nature. Because we've detached ourselves from Krishna. Instead of directing that energy of attraction toward Krishna and reciprocating with him, we've directed it toward matter and trying to be the enjoyers, the supreme enjoyers and controllers. And that's the source of our whole problem. So the key element is the mind. And if the mind can be purified by the process of devotional service, then gradually that strong desire to enjoy this material world abates to the same degree that our budding Krishna consciousness, or that growing kripa, that bhakti lata is growing in the heart. Then the material attractions have less and less attraction for us. So that's the very important point. And so niyata manasa, the mind has to be controlled. Here the process is kind of a technical process, that word that you kind of stumbled over a little bit. That's a key. Niyata manasa, what does that mean? It means mind controlled, right? Niyata manasa, with a regulated mind. Regulated mind. So then what's the result? If you actually achieve it, Shantim Nirvana, Shantim is peace, Nirvana Paramam, the supreme Nirvana. There we are, Nirvana, cessation of material existence. So that doesn't mean cessation of existence, it means cessation of material existence, and that means our entanglement in the material world. And Matsangstam, the spiritual sky, the kingdom of God attains. So there's not much time here in the Bhagavad Gita. He's in the middle of they're between two armies. The battle's about to begin. So Krishna's compressed everything here. It's much more expansively explained in the Chaitanya, the Srimad Bhagavatam and other literatures, what it means to attain the spiritual sky, the kingdom of God. And the wonderful thing about it is that in Krishna consciousness, it's so powerful. You don't even have to wait till you leave your body to attain this consciousness. You can be simultaneously aware of all the details of the spiritual world and basically living there while even you're living here at the same time by advanced Krishna consciousness. It's not limited by situation, other material situation. So cessation of material. Now, what does Prabhupada say in this purport? So Prabhupada, the ultimate goal in practicing yoga is now clearly explained. Now, Prabhupada, wrote this book, or dictated most of it. When he came to America, he found that yoga had become popular. In fact, when he came to New York, the first place he stayed was a yoga studio. Somehow he contacted this Dr. Mishra, and he had already established his yoga studio in uptown New York. So Prabhupada was able to stay there, and he had a retreat a little bit out in the country, Ananda Ashram, I think it was called. And Prabhupada gave him at least one program, and maybe several. And he had, chanters. He would chant the Hare Krishna and the Prasadam. It was popular, but they were pretty much all of them committed to Dr. Mishra and their program. I think a few of them became interested. I'm not sure. There was one fellow, I forget the names now, who became an important contact with Prabhupada in the early days. He was practically his only serious follower in uptown before he came downtown. But he was aware of this. When he went to San Francisco, the same thing. You had people interested in yoga. The yoga studios were starting to be established. But he saw directly, when he was up in Dr. Mishra's place, that it was a pale shell of what real yoga was. He speaks, it was almost comical. He said they're trying to meditate and they're falling asleep because they close their eyes, and because Dr. Mishra wasn't really presenting the final goal of yoga. People were interested in getting peace. They were interested in health. That's why I started yoga, to improve my health, and it worked. And luckily, I also came in touch with the devotees, But it's when there's a whole series of tapes called the Yoga System tapes, the Yoga System recordings, which Prabhupada mostly recorded in L.A. On the 6th chapter, and he's just explaining, very forcefully, the distinction between the popular yoga, which is really cheating. The point is they're not really giving the final goal of yoga. So in his purports here, Prabhupada makes it very clear what the actual goal of yoga is. And Krishna is making it clear himself. The goal is matparaha, and return back to God, matsangstam, the spiritual sky. Prabhupada, he talks about the abode. There's no need of sun, moon, or electricity. He's referencing the 15th chapter. Krishna gives a little hint there. Consummate yogi, perfect understanding Krishna, him by the Lord himself. Matchitta, matpara, matstanam. So where are these words coming from? Well, matchitta, matpara refer back to the text 13 and 14. Actually, text 14. If you look in text 14, you'll see the last line there, matchitta, yukta asita matparaha. I don't know if you can see that. Page 268, near the top. So he's referring back to that, matchitta. He's making the point that Krishna is not mincing words. He's saying it ultimately is putting your mind on me, making me the ultimate goal of life, and matsangstam. Prabhupada says matstanam here. Somebody mistyped it, because this is, I think, at this point they're starting to transcribe. We're going to change that to matsangstam, which comes from the very verse we just read, which means my abode. And there'll be some maybe adjustment there. So that supreme abode, matsangstam, that's our goal. Prabhupada's famous go back home, back to Godhead. That's the real goal of yoga. And he explains that it's called Goloka. He quotes the Brahma Samhita. And then at the same time, right in the Brahma Samhita, it describes Akilatma Bhuta, that he's in Goloka, but at the same time he's in the heart of everyone. That, all pervasiveness. So it's very clear. And he references here, keeping the mind absorbed in Krishna. This is a line describing King Ambarish. You've heard of King Ambarish? Yeah, and this is the first line of the famous verses describing his state of mind. Savai Mana Krishna Padara Bandayo. He put his mind on the lotus feet of Krishna. So,
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hi, Bo.
Please accept my humble obeisances. This is Dravida Dasa. Prabhu, I have one question about. Can I ask?
Is it on this? Is it on this verse?
Yeah, it's on this verse.
Okay, go ahead.
On this slope. So, first of all, thank you for the wonderful class as always. Thanks, Hare Krishna. So, The moksha nirvana is moksha and nirvana is the same. That's my first question, and the second one is, should we desire for that at this level?
Okay, what was the word you used? Moksha, nirvana? What was it?
Moksha and nirvana. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, moksha, nirvana. That particular phrase I don't see here. We had paramam nirvana. What is it? Shantim? Shanti nirvana. Nirvana paramam. Nirvana paramam. And moksha simply means liberation. Right? And is that what you're asking? Moksha, right? Those two words, moksha
Yes,
and nirvana.
yes.
Yeah. So moksha and nirvana are practically synonymous in general lingo. And here Krishna mentions that Shantim and Nirvana Paramam. In chapter 5, last chapter, we had this phrase Brahma Nirvana, which was repeated so often. The idea is that this, Nirvana, of course, is a popular word. It's usually associated with Buddhism, but we find Brahma Nirvana at the end of the second chapter in Bhagavad Gita, and that simply means, what does Nirvana mean? Finished. Is it finished? Your entanglement, your involvement in the material world is finished. It's like Brahma Bhuta, be above the modes of material nature. You see, and so this is not something that we aspire for separately from Krishna, from Krishna consciousness. It's one of the states that we attain on the way to going back to Godhead. But never do we try to negate our individuality or our personality or the variegatedness of spiritual life. In other words, the big mistake made by the Mayavadis and the impersonalists, the Voidists, is to think that variegatedness means material variegatedness, because this is what we know. And we know that causes suffering. Our various attractions for things here, which result in pain and suffering. Any sense gratification has its suffering as on the backside, and often the suffering is much greater than any pleasure we got. So nirvana means complete detachment from that, and cessation of the material engagement of the senses and the mind. But it doesn't mean, especially in the bhakti understanding, stoppage of the senses and stoppage of the mind. This is like a key point, is that the senses continue to work, but they work in a purified way by connecting us to Krishna. We know that from the simple idea of prasadam. We have to eat to live, so that eating process can be done in ignorance and keep us more entangled in this world and committing extreme sins and the suffering. The simple act of eating a hamburger, But when we understand the science of prasadam, then we know what kinds of food to prepare, offer them to the Lord, take remnants, and that becomes purification of our consciousness and of our senses that we're using to eat. So that's still nirvana. That's Brahma nirvana. So the goal of the devotee, of the devotees, is not liberation, is not moksha. But still, in our neophyte stage, when our motivation may not be completely pure, simply our pure motivation to please Krishna, then part of our motivation can be, I really want to get out of this world. I don't want to come back again. I want to get free of birth, death, old age, disease. That's okay. That's fine. You look at chapter 13, and there's a list of elements of knowledge from 8 to 11. 8, 9, 10, 11. I think there's four verses there. And one of them is Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadi, Dukkha, Dosha, Anudarshanam. Anudarshanam means to see and to be aware of the evils, of the dangers of birth, old age, disease, and death. So that means that we want to get free of those. So that's fine. But once that gets us onto the path and we're practicing bhakti yoga, then with the progressive clearing of the consciousness and purification, we become more and more absorbed in tasting the nectar and the pleasure of performing Krishna consciousness. And mukti becomes insignificant. That's why Lord Chaitanya says in his Shikshastika, Nadanang nadanang nasundarim kapitang vajagadish kamaye mama janmani janmani shradem pavada bhakta dahoitaki tvahi. What do we want? What is our motivation? Motivation means something you want to achieve by any kind of activity. what Lord Chaitanya is teaching us? First he says, what we should not want. Nadanam, something material, wealth or anything, materially valuable. Najanam, followers, that prestige that comes with having many followers. Sundarim, beautiful spouse, man or woman. Kavitam can be, just great material knowledge. And mama janmani janmani shude, so birth after birth. That means I don't want liberation. So now what do you want? Bhavata bhaktada hoitaki tvayi. Unmotivated, uninterrupted devotional service to you, O Lord. In other words, pure bhakti. So that should be, we should aim toward that motivation. But in the meanwhile, to keep us going and strict on the path, we should understand, I don't want to come back to this world. That's fine. That's fine as a motivation. But you see, it's not the ultimate motivation of the devotees. Eventually we graduate and we realize, as like Bhavamangal Thakur, bhakti, we say, bhakti stvayi stidatara bhagavan hirisya daivena nakpalati dibhya kishora murti mukti swayam mukulitanjali sevate sman dharmata kamakata yaksamayak patiksha. He says, my dear Lord, if someone is fixed in devotional service unto you, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavan, then you'll get the fruit of that devotional service, which is a vision of your beautiful adolescent form, idyllic form. That's the fruit. And as far as moksha or mukti is concerned, she's standing at the doorway with the anjali, with her, how can I serve you? And is whatever I need of dharma, artha, and kama is standing with her. In other words, those you don't worry about. That will come automatically, ultimately. So our concern is ultimately not nirvana or moksha. Our concern is Krishna. If we just fix our mind on Krishna, everything follows from there. Okay, is that okay?
Thank you very much. Yes, Hare Krishna.
Haribol done, right?
Very nice. Thank you.
Okay, we're going on now to some more practical instructions. Text 16. Nat yashnatastu yogosti nachaikan tamanashnataha nachati swapnashilasya jagvato naivacharjana. There is no possibility of one's becoming a yogi, O Arjuna, if one eats too much, or eats too little, sleeps too much, or does not sleep enough. Purport: regulation of diet and sleep is recommended herein for the yogis. Too much eating means eating more than is required to keep the body and soul together. There is no need for men to eat animals, because there is an ample supply of grains, vegetables, fruits, and milk. Such simple foodstuff is considered to be in the mode of goodness, according to the Bhagavad Gita. Animal food is for those in the mode of ignorance. Therefore, those who indulge in animal food, drinking, smoking, and eating food which is not first offered to Krishna, will suffer sinful reactions because of eating only polluted things. Okay. Bhunjatete dvagam papa yepachantyatma karanat. Anyone who eats for sense pleasure or cooks for himself, not offering his food to Krishna, eats only sin. One who eats sin and eats more than is allotted to him cannot execute perfect yoga. It is best that one eat only the remnants of foodstuff offered to Krishna. A person in Krishna consciousness does not eat anything which is not first offered to Krishna. Therefore, only the Krishna conscious person can attain perfection in yoga practice. Nor can one who artificially abstains from eating, manufacturing his own personal process of fasting, practice yoga. The Krishna conscious person observes fasting as it is recommended in the scriptures. He does not fast or eat more than is required, and he is thus competent to perform yoga practice. One who eats more than required will dream very much while sleeping, and he must consequently sleep more than is required. One should not sleep more than 6 hours daily. One who sleeps more than 6 hours out of 24 is certainly influenced by the mode of ignorance. A person in the mode of ignorance is lazy and prone to sleep a great deal. Such a person cannot perform yoga. So this is a challenge. Brahmacharya ashram, we've been, this is usually a place where you struggle with that, because you give up, you can control the sex desire, giving up, but there's all of this wonderful opulent prasadam. So it may take a while to be able to control that. But it's scientific. We know the first verse of the Upadeshamrita. This is one you should know. Work on it. Vacho vegam manasakroda vegam jihva vegam rodopasta vegam etan vegam yovashaheta dira savamapi mam pradabingsa shishyat. One who can control the urges of the speech, the mind, and anger, and the tongue, belly, and genitals can make disciples all over the world. He's actually Dhira. So it's a fact that, the problem is you eat too much, and that becomes a big distraction when you're trying to chant the next morning. Or you had to sleep more than possible, and you missed Mangalarti, whatever. So it's a struggle. The process usually is that the prasadam, you eat more than required when you first get there, because that becomes your main sense gratification. And so that's good, because then it still, so many things you've given up, and gradually you give that up. Not you give up prasadam, but you give up overeating, and you can control it. And so it comes with time. And basically, it becomes a, when you get the higher taste, the service itself gives you so much pleasure, and that becomes less of a problem. But Prabhupada emphasizes the importance of offering the food, of eating prasadam only, and automatically then you have to be vegetarian, and you learn what you can offer, what you can't offer, and so forth. So eating, the moderation is the thing, and that will be explained in the next verse, emphasizing it. And that's one of the things the yogis are famous for. They go off to the mountains or something. What are they going to eat? They can only eat a few berries here, roots here, whatever they can find. So it becomes a very austere situation. But in Krishna consciousness, the cooking and eating and partaking really becomes an exchange of love when it's done in full Krishna consciousness. That's why we have that prayer. Sharira vijajal jadhiniga jive pelevasaya dharma de vidaya loba moya sudumati. The body is a network of, the senses are networks of path leading to death, but you have given us this nice prasadam, so let us take this prasadam and remember, Krishna. The idea is remember Krishna while you're taking prasadam, and in this way purify the eating. Eating, sleeping, mating, defending are these four necessities. And if you take out the mating, and of course defending, you have to wear something warm, defend against the cold, but eating and sleeping are going to be there. So if you minimize those or regulate those, it becomes much easier to can focus the mind. That's as simple as that. Otherwise it's not possible. Alright, text 17. Yuktahar viharasya yukta chestasya karmasu Yukta swapnavabodhasya yogo bhavati dukkha. He who is regulated in his habits of eating, sleeping, recreation, and work can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. Purport. Extravagance in the matter of eating, sleeping, defending, and mating, which are demands of the body, can block advancement in the practice of yoga. As far as eating is concerned, it can be regulated only when one is practiced to take and accept prasadam, sanctified food. Lord Krishna is offered, according to the Bhagavad Gita 9.26, vegetables, flowers, fruits, grains, milk, etc. In this way, a person in Krishna consciousness becomes automatically trained not to accept food not meant for human consumption, or not in the category of goodness. As far as sleeping is concerned, a Krishna conscious person is always alert in the discharge of his duties in Krishna consciousness, and therefore any unnecessary time spent sleeping is considered a great loss. Avyarta karatvam. A Krishna conscious person cannot bear to pass a minute of his life without being engaged in the service of the Lord. Therefore his sleeping is kept to a minimum. His ideal in this respect is Srila Rupa Goswami, who was always engaged in the service of Krishna and who could not sleep more than 2 hours a day, and sometimes not even that. Thakur Haridas would not even accept prasadam, nor even sleep for a moment without finishing his daily routine of chanting with his beads 300,000 names. As far as work is concerned, a Krishna conscious person does not do anything which is not connected with Krishna's interest, and thus his work is always regulated and is untainted by sense gratification. Since there is no question of sense gratification, there is no material leisure for a person in Krishna consciousness. And because he is regulated in all his work, speech, sleep, wakefulness, and all other bodily activities, there is no material misery for him. So that's the dukkha. Dukkha means all of your miseries are eliminated. If the mind is completely absorbed in Krishna and the body is regulated, the senses are not engaged in sense gratification, then you can attain this state that was described in the second chapter, which is a shanti. You get the prasadam of the Lord, you get peace, and the real key is the control of the mind and with it the senses, and then fixing them on Krishna and the vairagya. When you're really detached from the material attraction, that's when real peace comes. Because when you think about it, it's this unfulfilled desires in the mind. You're going here, going there, and thinking it. That causes the lack of peace and agitation. All right, going on, describing the successful yogi. Yada viniyatam chittam atmanyevavatishtate nispihak sarvakamebhyo yukta it yuchate tada. When the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to be well established in yoga. Purport: the activities of the yogi are distinguished from those of an ordinary person by his characteristic cessation from all kinds of material desires, of which sex is the chief. A perfect yogi is so well disciplined in the activities of the mind that he can no longer be disturbed by any kind of material desire. This perfectional stage can automatically be attained by persons in Krishna consciousness, as stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam 9:4-18-20. So this is again Ambarish Maharaj. These are the 3 verses describing his activities. Savaimana Krishna Badara Vindayo Vachangsi Vaikunda Gunanu Varnane Kara Hare Mandira Majanadishu Shutin Chakara Chuta Satkathodeye Pakundalingalaya Darshane Drishau Tadmritya Gatra Sparshinga Sangamam Ghanam Chatatpada Soroja Saurabhe Srimatulosya Vasanang Tarapite Pado Hare Cheta Badana Sarpane Shiro Rishikesh Badabhivandane Kamam Chadase Natu Kama Kamyaya Yatottama Shloka Janashaya Ratihi. King Ambarish first of all engaged his mind on the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Then, one after another, he engaged his words in describing the transcendental qualities of the Lord, his hands in mopping the temple of the Lord, his ears in hearing of the activities of the Lord, his eyes in seeing the transcendental forms of the Lord, his body in touching the bodies of the devotees, his sense of smell in smelling the scents of the lotus flowers offered to the Lord, his tongue in tasting the tulsi leaf offered at the lotus feet of the Lord, his legs in going to the places of pilgrimage and the temple of the Lord, his head in offering obeisances unto the Lord, and his desires in executing the mission of the Lord. All these transcendental activities are quite befitting a pure devotee. This transcendental stage may be inexpressible subjectively by the followers of the impersonalist path, but it becomes very easy and practical for a person in Krishna consciousness, as is apparent in the above description of the engagements of Maharaj Ambarish. Unless the mind is fixed on the lotus feet of the Lord by constant remembrance, such transcendental engagements are not practical. In the devotional service of the Lord, therefore, these prescribed activities are called archan, or engaging all the senses in the service of the Lord. The senses and the mind require engagements. Simple abnegation is not practical. Therefore, for people in general, especially those who are not in the renounced order of life, transcendental engagement of the senses and the mind, as described above, is the perfect process for transcendental achievement, which is called yukta in the Bhagavad Gita. So this is a wonderful description of Ambarish, who was a king, and kings are often involved in so many material things, and so the subjects of mind is agitated here and there. But like so many other great kings in the Bhagavatam, he was a perfect devotee here. And it described practically what he was doing. The mind was engaged in the lotus feet of Krishna. With his words, he's glorifying. With his hands, he's mopping the temple. With his ears, he's hearing Krishna Katha. And with his eyes, he's seeing the beautiful form of the Lord. He's embracing the bodies of the devotees. And all the other senses are involved like that. So you see, they're all practical activities. Nobody's going to stop us from mopping the floor, of the temple here. And we can see that the whole temple life means a full engagement, for the mind and senses, and it's a wonderful opportunity for purification. The whole thing is purification, and it depends on remembering Krishna, and it produces remembrance of Krishna. When we hear the holy name and when we hear descriptions of Krishna, that's our meditation. The more we can become absorbed in that, the sound vibration is our best way of contacting Krishna through the sound, in this age especially. And it provides a complete absorption for the mind. It's practical samadhi. Even in our impure state, we can develop that where our daily life, and this idea of not wasting time, there's always something to do for Krishna, always some duty, always something, so there's certainly always something to read if we have some free time, So Prabhupada has given us, out of his great compassion, so many ways to stay engaged in Krishna consciousness, and that's what these temples are for. That's what this whole movement is for. So this is the practical statement here. And it says we're nicely established in yoga. Now he's going to describe that state just like a lamp in a windless place. Yata dipo navatasto ningate sopamasmata yogino yatta chittasya yunjito yogamatmanah. As a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist whose mind is controlled remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self. Purport: a truly Krishna-conscious person, always absorbed in transcendence, in constant undisturbed meditation on his worshipable Lord, is as steady as a lamp in a windless place. Okay, now these next 4 verses, just one line long, describe this highest state of samadhi. I always found this very fascinating because all of this state is ultimately there for the bhakti yogi as well. Yatro paramate chittam. No, you're not going to try it? It's just they're just regular verses. It's not the Yatro paramate chittam nirudham yoga sevaya yatra chaivatmanatmanam pashyan atmani tushyati sukham atyantikam yattad buddhigrayam atindriyam veti yatra chaivayam stitas chalati tatpatah yang labdva chapalam labham manyate nadikam tatah yasmin stito na dukkena gurunapi vichalyate tam vidya dukkha sanyoga viyogam yoga sangitam. In the stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the Cap-S self, the Supreme Self, by the pure mind, and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. Purport: by practice of yoga, one becomes gradually detached from material concepts. This is the primary characteristic of the yoga principle. And after this, one becomes situated in trance or samadhi, which means that the yogi realizes the supersoul through transcendental mind and senses and intelligence, without any of the misgivings of identifying the self with the superself. Yoga practice is more or less based on the principles of the Patanjali system. Some unauthorized commentators try to identify the individual soul with the supersoul, and the monists think this to be liberation. But they do not understand the real purpose of the Patanjali system of yoga. There is an acceptance of transcendental pleasure in the Patanjali system, but the monists do not accept this transcendental pleasure out of fear of jeopardizing the theory of oneness. The duality of knowledge and knower is not accepted by the non-dualist, but in this verse, transcendental pleasure realized through transcendental senses is accepted. And this is corroborated by Patanjali Muni, the famous exponent of the yoga system. The great sage declares in his Yoga Sutras 434, Purushartha Shunyanam Gunanam Pratiprasava Kaivalyam Swarupa Patishta Va Chitti Shakti Riti. This Chitti Shakti, or internal potency, is transcendental. Purushartha means material religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and, at the end, the attempt to become one with the Supreme. This, quote, oneness with the Supreme is called Kaivalyam by the monist. But according to Patanjali, this Kaivalyam is an internal or transcendental potency by which the living entity becomes aware of his constitutional position. In the words of Lord Chaitanya, this state of affairs is called Chaito Darpanamarjanam, or clearance of the impure mirror of the mind. This, quote, clearance is actually liberation, or Bhavamahadav Agni Nirvapanam. The theory of nirvana, also preliminary, corresponds with this principle. In the Bhagavatam 2.10.6, this is called Swarupena Vyavastitihi. The Bhagavad Gita also confirms this situation in this verse. After nirvana, or material cessation, there is the manifestation of spiritual activities, or devotional service to the Lord, known as Krishna consciousness. In the words of the Bhagavatam, Swarupena Vyavastiti, this is the real life of the living entity. Maya, or illusion, is the condition of spiritual life contaminated by material infection. Liberation from this material infection does not mean destruction of the original eternal position of the living entity. Patanjali also accepts this by his words, Kaivalyam Swarupa Patishta Va Chitti Shaktir Iti. This Chitti Shakti, or transcendental pleasure, is real life. This is confirmed in the Vedanta Sutta 1.1.12 as Anandamayo Bhyasat. This natural transcendental pleasure is the ultimate goal of yoga and is easily achieved by execution of devotional service, or Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga will be vividly described in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. That's the next chapter. In the yoga system, as described in this chapter, there are two kinds of samadhi, called Sampragyata Samadhi and Asampragyata Samadhi. When one becomes situated in the transcendental position by various philosophical researchers, he is said to have achieved Sampragyata Samadhi. In the Asampragyata Samadhi, there is no longer any connection with the mundane pleasure, for one is then transcendental to all sorts of happiness derived from the senses. When the yogi is once situated in that transcendental position, he is never shaken from it. Unless the yogi is able to reach this position, he is unsuccessful. Today's so-called yoga practice, which involves various sense pleasures, is contradictory. A yogi indulging in sex and intoxication is a mockery. Even those yogis who are attracted by the siddhis, or perfections, in the process of yoga are not perfectly situated. If yogis are attracted by the byproducts of yoga, then they cannot attain the stage of perfection, as is stated in this verse. Persons, therefore, indulging in the make-show practice of gymnastic feats or siddhis should know that the aim of yoga is lost in that way. The best practice of yoga in this age is Krishna consciousness, which is not baffling. A Krishna conscious person is so happy in his occupation that he does not aspire after any other happiness. There are many impediments, especially in this age of hypocrisy, to practicing Hatha Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. But there is no such problem in executing Karma Yoga or Bhakti Yoga. As long as the material body exists, one has to meet the demands of the body, namely eating, sleeping, defending, and mating. But a person who is in pure bhakti yoga or in Krishna consciousness does not arouse the senses while meeting the demands of the body. Rather, he accepts the bare necessities of life, making the best use of a bad bargain, and enjoys transcendental happiness in Krishna consciousness. He is callous toward incidental occurrences, such as accidents, disease, scarcity, and even the death of a most dear relative. But he is always alert to execute his duties in Krishna consciousness or bhakti yoga. Accidents never deviate him from his duty. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 2.14, Agamapaino nityastam satikshasya bharata. He endures all such incidental occurrences because he knows that they come and go and do not affect his duties. In this way he achieves the highest perfection in yoga practice. So this is kind of the crescendo in this chapter. And I was always fascinated by this description of samadhi. Ability to see the self by the pure mind and relish and rejoice in the self. So that self, you see the capital letter there, that means the super soul. So he's seeing Krishna in the heart, relishing and rejoicing in that vision of Krishna. That is the bhakti yogi seeing Krishna. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. Now in the Sanskrit, we have these words here. Sukhamatyantikam yata. That's atyantika sukha is the highest happiness, highest bliss. Buddhigrayam atindriyam. So it's the intelligence. By the intelligence has grasped this happiness. This just like we know, if we think about it, when we experience some pleasure in Krishna consciousness, what it is a little bit more absorption in Krishna, usually through kirtan or through some experience of preaching, interacting with him, but glorifying Krishna and being absorbed in him. And that's a function of the intelligence. The intelligence is is the special quality of the human mind as opposed to animals. And by that purified intelligence, when it's filled with thoughts of Krishna, how to please Krishna, and directing the senses and the mind how to please Krishna, that's where the bliss comes in. You're opening up the channel to Ananda. Anandamaya Vyasat came up, this phrase. That's one of the Vedanta Sutras. It means Krishna is made of Ananda. He's full of Ananda, always, and we're part and parcel of him, so we can also attain that state. Realized through transcendental senses, the senses become purified, and they become sources of great happiness because they're always contacting Krishna. So a stabber never departs from the truth. Upon gaining it, he thinks there is no greater gain. I've heard Prabhupada many times just quote that one line, Yam labdva chapalam labhan manyate nadikam tataha. Having attained it, labha, aparam labhan, he thinks there's no greater gain. There's nadikam tataha. And even the greatest misery difficulties does not cause him any misery. It's transcendental to the difficulties in this material body, material life. Never shaken even in the midst of greatest difficulty. So this is describing the great devotees as well. They are constantly in samadhi because they're absorbed in thoughts of Krishna. So this is the state we want to try to attain. And then, so now, okay, we don't have time to continue. We'll pick up there tomorrow in text 24. But Prabhupada, he quotes Patanjali here quite a bit, and he's showing how Patanjali also recognizes Chitti Shakti, which is the pleasure potency. Okay, so we don't have much time. Are there any other questions, comments? Eyeball. Dhanavad Pranam, Tabas.
We have Alex Prabhu, Mukunda Prabhu, and Dhanavadi Mataji with us.
Alex is there?
Yeah. Alex and Mukunda Prabhu.
Alex and Mukunda. Okay. So even though you're still you're attending the class like you usually do. Haribol, Alex and Mukunda. Alex, can you hear me?
I think we need to unmute his mic.
Okay.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Haribol, did you memorize that verse?
He's working on it. He was working on it before class.
Okay. All right. I'll chant the verse. Everyone in the audience can hear it, can memorize it. This is from the Govinda Lilamrita, meditation on Krishna. This is yoga. Denu vrindamanamanamayantam venu geetamamatam visvajantam renu rushatachalalakavantam kenu vicha samayo namodantam. Description of Krishna coming back from the forest of Vrindavan. Denu vrindam, the herds of cows, he's very leisurely walking behind, and as he does, he places upon his flute and creates a stream of total nectar. Venu Gitam, the song of the flute is pure nectar. Venu Gitam amitam visadantam. And all that dust being kicked up by the cows, the sacred dust, is powdering his hair, making him even more beautiful. Renu Rushita Denu, Renu Rushita Chalalakavantam. Who seeing this sight would not attain the highest bliss? This is our samadhi, this is our yoga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.
Thank you, Hare Krishna Prabhu. Very nice class.
Hari Bol then, right? Okay, same time tomorrow.